There were exactly 37 steps from the elevator to the refreshment table at the Blackstone and Company holiday party. Rachel Mitchell had counted them twice. Once on her way in, pretending not to notice the sea of glittering cocktail dresses and polished shoes brushing past her. And once again on her way back from nervously grabbing a glass of cheap champagne she didn't even like. It was better than standing still. Moving meant blending in, and blending in meant survival. The rooftop venue was aggressively elegant, with strings of warm lights overhead and a live jazz quartet playing near the bar. She hated how beautiful it all was. It felt like a trap, like something out of a corporate fairy tale that would punish anyone who dared believe in happy endings. Especially junior analysts who'd barely been at the company 6 months. Rachel wore a navy blue dress that she had spent 2 hours choosing, even though no one would notice her. That was the plan. Her dark curls were half pinned, half loose, makeup minimal, just enough to look like she had tried. She had. She always tried. Just not too much. That was the trick. Be competent, be invisible. She sipped the champagne and looked around, eyes skimming past groups of people she vaguely recognized. Then her gaze caught on the epicenter of the room's energy. Louis Blackstone.
CEO.
Legend. Ice Queen. God-tier designer suit that somehow looked like it had been made for her body and her body alone. Louis stood in a small group near the large glass windows, laughing softly at something a VP said. Her laugh didn't match her reputation. Rachel expected something sharper, more cutting. Instead, it was low, restrained, almost amused. Even that felt dangerous. Louis was older, sure, but not in a way that made her seem distant. 34. In her prime. With her sleek dark hair in a low chignon and a glass of whiskey in her hand, she looked like a storm dressed in velvet. Rachel tried not to stare. She failed. No one ever talked to Louis unless they were someone. Rachel was not someone. But she couldn't help thinking, with a shiver of something she refused to name, that Louis Blackstone was the kind of person who changed the temperature of a room just by being in it. She didn't need to speak. People reacted to her presence, like prey sensing a predator. Or gravity. And just as Rachel was turning away, hoping to disappear into the crowd again, she heard it. Mitchell, isn't it? Rachel froze. Louis was looking at her. No, Louis was looking into her. Sharp, dark eyes fixed with interest that should not, under any circumstances, exist. I don't think we've officially met. Rachel's feet moved on their own, bringing her closer, even as her brain screamed at her to run. Yes, Rachel. Mitchell. Junior analyst, she said, nearly tripping over her own voice. Louis extended a hand, and Rachel shook it. Her fingers were warm, grip firm, a little too confident. I've heard good things, Louis said, and Rachel blinked. From who? I try to stay under the radar. Louis smirked. You're doing a terrible job of it tonight. Before Rachel could respond, an older executive near them made some offhand comment about how the CEO probably couldn't outrank her own staff. Louis's expression changed instantly. Sharp, calculating,
And amused.
Is that so? She murmured. The exec laughed nervously. Rachel, emboldened by 1.5 glasses of champagne and a deep, burning curiosity, made the mistake of muttering, She drinks like a college freshman, huh? Not loud. Barely audible. But Louis heard. She turned.
Slowly.
Eyebrows raised. Excuse me? Rachel's stomach dropped.
Sorry.
That wasn't, I meant, but Louis was already grinning, dangerous and delighted. You think you can outdrink me?
No.
God, no. Is that a challenge? There was no good answer. Saying yes would be suicide. Saying no would be cowardice. Rachel hesitated for half a second too long. Fine, Louis said, already turning to the bar.
10 shots.
First one to back out loses. Rachel followed, like someone walking into her own execution. The entire party began to gather around, sensing blood. Rachel sat on a high stool beside the CEO of Blackstone and Company, with a row of tequila shots lined up in front of them. She stared at the glasses. She stared at Louis. You're insane. And you're in trouble. The first shot burned. The second one hit harder. By the third, Rachel stopped feeling her legs. Louis, on the other hand, remained perfectly composed, except for the faint flush in her cheeks. By the fifth shot, they were laughing. Honest laughter. Not polite office chuckles. And something shifted. The crowd faded. The music dulled. There were only the two of them, closer than they should be, breath mingling, Louis's knee brushing hers under the table. At one point, Louis leaned in and whispered something that made Rachel choke on her sixth shot. "You don't look invisible to me, Rachel." And that's when everything started to blur. The cab ride. Louis's hand on her thigh. Rachel's head on her shoulder. A kiss that tasted like tequila and danger. Elevator doors closing behind them. Louis pressing her against the wall, breathless. And then nothing. A soft blackout. When Rachel opened her eyes again, she was in a bed far too large to be hers. Sheets that felt too expensive. Air that smelled faintly of jasmine and sex. And then she turned her head and saw her, Louis, sleeping, shirtless, peaceful, beautiful. Rachel's heart stopped, then raced. She sat up with a gasp, clutching the sheet to her chest. Her head pounded. Her stomach rolled. Her entire life flashed before her eyes. Because she had just slept with her CEO. The first rule of waking up in your CEO's bed is simple. Don't panic. Rachel broke that rule immediately. She moved like a soldier in enemy territory, limbs stiff, heart thudding like a war drum, clutching the sheet around her as if it could protect her from the reality crashing down on her like a wave. The sunlight streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows that made the Manhattan skyline look like a backdrop in a movie. Everything in the room screamed money and restraint, gray linens, black marble, minimalist design. Everything except her. She was a mess. Hair wild. Makeup smudged. Wearing nothing. Not even her dignity. She scanned the room for her clothes, found her dress slumped over a sleek leather chair, and tiptoed toward it, wincing as the floor creaked beneath her.
Don't wake the CEO. Don't wake the CEO.
If she could just grab her things and vanish, maybe, just maybe, she could pretend none of this had happened. Blame it on a blackout. A dream. A very detailed, tequila-fueled hallucination. She reached the chair, snatched up her dress and heels like a thief, and started toward the door. "You leaving without saying goodbye?" Rachel froze mid-step, the sheet still wrapped around her like a toga of shame. Louis's voice was calm, amused, and awake. Rachel turned slowly, praying to every god she didn't believe in that she had misheard. She hadn't. Louis was propped up against the headboard, the white sheet casually draped over her chest, one hand behind her head, the other resting lazily on her stomach. Her dark hair was slightly tousled, her face unfairly perfect even in the harsh light of morning. She looked like sin wrapped in silk. And she was smiling. That slow, knowing smile that made Rachel want to crawl into a hole and die. "I didn't want to wake you," Rachel said, her voice 3 octaves too high. Clearly. Louis tilted her head, eyes trailing over Rachel in a way that made her skin feel like it was on fire. "You're cute when you're sneaking around." "I wasn't sneaking. I was relocating." "Aha. With your shoes in your hand and no pants on." "I don't have pants. It was a dress." Technicalities. Louis stretched, the sheet slipping just enough to reveal the bare curve of her shoulder. Rachel looked away. She had to. Otherwise, she'd combust. "This was a mistake," Rachel said quickly. "It was the alcohol."
And the party.
"And God. I don't even remember most of it." "Some of us have a better tolerance," Louis murmured. "And better memory." Rachel's stomach dropped. "Do you remember everything?" "Enough." The word lingered in the air like a challenge. Rachel tightened her grip on the dress clutched to her chest. "I'm really sorry. I shouldn't have. Whatever happened. It can't happen again." Louis's expression shifted slightly. "You think I'm going to fire you?" Rachel's silence was answer enough. Louis sighed and sat up straighter, the sheet somehow still managing to cover just enough to be maddening. "Rachel, I'm not going to fire you for what happened." "Are you sure?" Because I feel like this is textbook inappropriate workplace behavior. Only if someone files a complaint. And you wouldn't? Why would I? You didn't do anything wrong. Rachel blinked. Except sleep with my boss. Allegedly. Lewis.
Fine.
You're right. We should both pretend this never happened. She said it casually, but something flickered in her eyes, something sharp and unreadable. Rachel didn't know what to do with that. Okay, she said quietly. Good.
Great.
Forgetting. That's what we're doing. Lewis leaned forward slightly, eyes still locked on hers. You're welcome to use the shower. Towels are in the cabinet. You might want to check your neck, by the way. Rachel's hand flew up to her throat instinctively. Why? Lewis didn't answer. She just smiled. Rachel darted into the bathroom and closed the door, heart racing. She leaned over the sink and looked at herself in the mirror. And there it was. A faint, unmistakable mark just above her collarbone. Not large, not obvious, but damning. A whisper of proof that the night had happened. That Lewis had been close. Had touched her. She covered it with her hand and cursed under her breath. 20 minutes later, she was dressed, slightly more composed, and standing awkwardly at the entrance of the apartment, clutching her purse like a lifeline. Lewis stood a few feet away, now in a silk robe, holding a mug of coffee like she had all the time in the world. You know, she said casually, most people leave after a one-night stand looking satisfied. Rachel glared. I'm not most people. No, Lewis said softly. You're not. And the way she said it made Rachel want to scream. Or kiss her again. She didn't either.
She turned and left.
The elevator doors closed behind her with a soft chime. And only then, in the quiet metal box, did she finally exhale.
Her phone buzzed in her bag.
A message from HR. Reminder. Quarterly performance reviews start Monday.
Perfect.
Because nothing screamed professionalism like facing your CEO after waking up in her bed. Rachel had never been more aware of her own heartbeat. It thudded in her chest like a ticking bomb as she sat in the executive conference room, desperately pretending to be engaged with the quarterly performance projections glowing on the large screen. Her notebook was open in front of her, pen in hand, a perfectly neutral expression painted on her face. She was trying.
God, was she trying?
But no amount of charts and bullet points could erase the fact that the woman seated at the head of the table, poised, unreadable, magnificent in a tailored charcoal suit, had seen her naked less than 48 hours ago, had kissed her, had touched her, had whispered things that still echoed in Rachel's head when she tried to sleep. Lewis Blackstone hadn't so much as looked at her since the meeting began. That was what made it worse. Her attention was everywhere and nowhere at once. On the numbers, on the way Lewis's fingers tapped absently against her mug, on the curve of her jaw when she tilted her head to listen to a report from the Chicago branch. Rachel had become a one-woman orchestra of anxiety and denial. She forced her eyes back to the screen, heart stuttering every time Lewis's voice filled the room with that signature cool precision. And then, because the universe had a dark sense of humor, Paul Brennan opened his mouth. Paul, senior consultant, 38, ego bloated from too many years of being told he was a genius by other men in suits. He chuckled, flipping through his notes. By the way, Lewis, I think you've officially become a legend after Friday night. Word on the floor is you drank Mitchell here under the table. Rachel's entire body went still. Her stomach dropped. Her spine straightened so fast it could have snapped. She didn't dare look at Lewis. Love what you've seen so far and want to help me keep creating these awesome stories on this channel? Then subscribe and hit the bell. Your subscription supports the channel and makes sure you get more exciting stories. Paul kept going, oblivious. I mean, I knew you could hold your own, but damn, 10 shots? She was apparently this close to passing out. More laughter. A few chuckles around the table. Some people looked at Rachel with mild curiosity, others with amusement. Rachel forced a tight smile. I don't really remember the end of the night, she managed, praying her voice didn't betray her. It was all kind of a blur. That's what tequila does, Paul said, leaning back. Bet you'll think twice before challenging the boss next time.
She didn't challenge me. Lewis said.
Her voice was calm, but sharp enough to cut the air in half. The room quieted instantly. Rachel finally looked at her. Lewis's eyes were unreadable, but fixed on Paul. Not Rachel. Not yet. If I remember correctly, she continued, someone else implied I couldn't keep up. Rachel was simply in the wrong place at the wrong time. Another ripple of laughter, but this one was hesitant. Rachel couldn't tell if Lewis was protecting her or playing with her. Paul raised his hands in mock surrender. Well, either way, it's good to know you're human like the rest of us. Lewis smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. Don't bet on it. The meeting moved on, but Rachel barely heard another word. Her cheeks were burning, her chest tight, and her hands clammy. The worst part wasn't the attention. It was the invisible thread between her and Lewis that only she could feel, like a wire stretched taut across the table. Every time Lewis shifted, every time her voice lilted across a sentence, Rachel's body reacted before her mind could catch up.
Heat.
Tension. Want. When the meeting finally ended, Rachel gathered her notes with trembling fingers, trying to slip away unnoticed.
Mitchell.
Lewis's voice. Firm. Rachel froze. Everyone else kept filing out of the room, oblivious. Stay back a minute. I'd like to go over your Q4 projections. The door clicked shut behind the last consultant. Rachel didn't move. Is that really what you want to talk about? She asked, eyes still on the table. What do you think I want to talk about? Rachel dared to glance up. Lewis was standing now, one hand resting on the back of her chair, the other in her pocket. She looked impossibly composed. You could have told him to drop it, Rachel murmured. I did. Not before it got awkward. Lewis tilted her head slightly. You think that was awkward? You're the CEO. I'm no one. It was humiliating. Lewis crossed the room slowly. Not toward her. Not quite. Just enough to close the distance without closing it entirely. It shouldn't be. What does that mean? It means, Lewis said, her voice quiet now, I don't regret it. And I don't think you do either. Rachel's breath caught. She hated how much she wanted to agree. This is dangerous. That's not an answer. You didn't even look at me during the whole meeting, Rachel said suddenly. Except when he brought it up. Then you looked right through me. Lewis smiled, faint but real. I was trying to be professional. You don't have to pretend it never happened. I get it. You're protecting the company. Your image. Your reputation. Is that what you think I'm doing? Rachel didn't answer.
Couldn't.
Lewis stepped a fraction closer, just enough that Rachel could smell her perfume again. Warm, subtle, expensive. For the record, Lewis said softly, I didn't forget. I just didn't want to make it harder for you. That sentence did something terrible to Rachel's chest. So what now? Now, Lewis said, stepping back, the moment evaporating like mist. You get back to work. And so do I. That's it. Lewis's smile returned. Unless you'd prefer I pull you into my office and kiss you again. Rachel's heart stopped. Lewis turned, cool and composed, and walked toward the door. She paused just before opening it. Didn't think so. And then she was gone. Rachel stared at the empty space she left behind, knees weak, head spinning. She hated her. She wanted her. Both things were true, and neither one would go away. Rachel had never been more aware of time. How slowly it moved. How every second in the office stretched into hours under the weight of something she couldn't name. It wasn't fear, not exactly. It was something heavier. Something warmer. Something far more dangerous. It had been 3 days since the meeting. Since the way Lewis had said, unless you'd prefer, I pull you into my office and kiss you again, like it was a casual observation. Rachel had replayed that sentence so many times she could hear it in her sleep. Every syllable haunted her. Every pause. Every choice of words. She'd expected Lewis to ignore her again, to go back to being the untouchable CEO in designer suits and calculated detachment. But instead, she did the opposite. It started with something small. Monday afternoon. A coffee from the fancy espresso machine on the 27th floor, only available to senior staff, showed up on Rachel's desk. No name, no note. Just her exact order. 2 sugars. No foam. She stared at it like it was a bomb. Asked around. No one admitted to delivering it. But when she glanced up, Louis was across the room in a meeting with the legal team. She didn't look at Rachel. Not once. Not directly. But she knew. Tuesday, it was lunch. The cafeteria was packed, so Rachel grabbed her salad and retreated to the lesser-used corner of the mezzanine. A quiet place. Safe. Or so she thought. Louis showed up 5 minutes later with her own tray. No security, no assistants, just her. As if it were normal. This spot's quieter, Louis said casually, sitting across from her. Didn't think anyone else used it, Rachel replied, trying to sound unaffected. I've always liked the view. Rachel forced herself to look at her food. You're not worried people might talk? They always talk. About us.
About me.
Being seen with you might actually improve my reputation. Rachel almost choked on a crouton. Louis didn't smile, but her eyes sparkled. She changed the subject before Rachel could respond, talking about the market trends, the upcoming quarterly pivot, the client they were courting in Dubai. But her voice was softer than usual, less guarded. And when she left, she touched Rachel's wrist lightly as she stood, like it was the most natural thing in the world. It wasn't. Nothing was natural about this. Nothing was safe. And yet, Wednesday morning, Rachel caught herself putting on lipstick. For work. She stared at her reflection in the mirror for a full minute afterward, horrified. Stop it, she whispered to herself. This is not happening. But it was. Louis was everywhere now. Not in a dramatic, overbearing way. She didn't call her into her office. Didn't send suggestive texts. No emails. No evidence. Just proximity. Too close in elevators. Too near during meetings. She'd brush past Rachel in the hallway with the faintest pressure of her hand on the small of her back. She'd lean in when speaking to her, just a little too much, just a second too long. She was watching her, testing her. And Rachel was failing. She couldn't stop thinking about that night. About how Louis had looked at her like she was the only person in the world. About the way her voice dropped when she said Rachel's name. On Thursday afternoon, it happened again. Rachel was leaving the building after a long day, coat clutched tight against the December wind, when a sleek black car pulled up beside her on the curb. The window rolled down. Louis. Need a ride? Rachel hesitated. I'm taking the train. It's freezing. And crowded.
Come on.
I'll drop you. She should have said no. She wanted to say no. But she didn't. The inside of the car smelled like leather and Louis. Warm, expensive, dangerous. They didn't speak for the first few blocks. Just silence, thick and humming. Then Louis glanced sideways. You're avoiding me. Rachel stared out the window. You're making it impossible to avoid you. Louis's lips curved. Is that a complaint? It's a warning. From the woman who kissed me in an elevator? You kissed me. Details. Rachel finally looked at her. What are we doing? Louis didn't answer right away. Her fingers drummed against the leather armrest. We're pretending this is nothing. And hoping we're both bad at pretending. Rachel laughed, bitter and breathless. You're going to get me fired. I told you. I won't. And what if someone else finds out? Then I'll deny it. I'll protect you. Why? Louis turned her head, eyes locking with Rachel's. Because I want you. The words hit like lightning. Rachel's breath caught. Her skin flushed hot.
She didn't speak. Couldn't.
Louis leaned back slightly, gaze never breaking. You don't have to say it back. You don't have to do anything. I'll stop.
If you want me to.
The car slowed in front of Rachel's building. She didn't move. Louis waited. Say the word, she murmured. And I'll never touch you again. Rachel looked at her, truly looked, and hated how much she didn't want to say it. Good night, Louis, she whispered. Then she opened the door and stepped into the cold. But even the wind couldn't cool the heat in her chest. Rachel hadn't meant to say anything. She had planned her entire Friday around not saying anything. Meetings, emails, avoiding certain floors, especially the 31st, where Louis's office loomed like a palace above the rest of the company. She had buried herself in spreadsheets and forecasts, taken late lunches, ignored 2 more anonymous coffees on her desk. She had every intention of keeping her head down and her mouth shut. But by the time 7 p.m. rolled around and she realized she was one of the last people left in the building, something in her snapped. It wasn't the coffee. It wasn't the glance Lewis had given her during the all-hands when she'd paused mid-sentence, just for a breath too long. It was the weight of it, the silence between them, the knowing, the pressure of pretending. She didn't knock. She just walked into Lewis's office like it wasn't the most reckless thing she'd ever done. Lewis looked up from her desk, surprised for only half a second. Rachel. Rachel closed the door behind her. Her heart was racing. She didn't sit. I need to say something, and I need you to let me finish before you respond. Lewis leaned back slowly, fingers steepled, eyes unreadable. Go ahead. Rachel took a breath.
Her mouth was dry.
Her hands shook slightly at her sides. I feel the same. What you said in the car.
That you wanted me.
I want you too. I have since that night. Lewis's expression didn't change, but something flickered in her gaze. Rachel rushed forward before she could lose her nerve. But this can't happen. Not again. Not unless we talk about what it actually means. Because I'm terrified. I'm terrified I'm going to ruin everything I've worked for. That people will think I got here because of you. That every promotion, every compliment, every win will be questioned. That I'll stop being good and start being yours. Her voice cracked slightly on the last word. She hated how raw it sounded. And I'm scared for you too. You've built this entire empire. Your name means power and control and perfection. If this got out, if anyone even thought something was happening between us, it could damage all of that. Your reputation, your authority, everything. Lewis sat perfectly still. Rachel swallowed. I'm not saying I don't want you. I do.
God, I do.
I think about you all the time. About your voice, your hands, the way you look at me like I'm not invisible. I haven't been able to focus in days. But I can't just fall into this like it doesn't matter. Because it does. It matters too much. The silence that followed was thick. Rachel's chest rose and fell with shallow breaths. Lewis finally stood, slowly coming around the desk until they were face to face. You think I haven't thought about all of that? Her voice was low, steady. You think I don't lie awake at night weighing every possible consequence? Then why keep pushing? Because you make me forget how cold this place has made me. Because you're not afraid of me, even when you should be. Because for the first time in years, I feel something when I walk into a room with someone, and it terrifies me too. Rachel blinked, caught off guard by the honesty. I'm not trying to take your life apart, Rachel. I would never risk your career for something casual. And I wouldn't risk mine unless it meant something. So what is this? I don't know yet, Lewis admitted. But I know I haven't stopped thinking about you since the night of the party. I know I haven't wanted anyone this badly in a long, long time. Rachel exhaled shakily, eyes burning. You know this doesn't end well, right? Or it does, Lewis said softly. But only if we stop pretending. Rachel looked away, suddenly overwhelmed. We can't be reckless. We won't be. We can't flirt in meetings. We can't sneak off or send messages. Agreed. And we definitely can't sleep together again. Lewis raised an eyebrow. That might be the hardest one. Rachel laughed despite herself. The sound strained but real. I'm serious. So am I. Lewis stepped closer. Just enough for the air between them to shift, grow heavier. We'll do this your way. Slowly.
Carefully.
No one knows. No risks. Just moments. When they matter. Rachel looked up at her, heart hammering. And if we get caught, then we'll deal with it. Together. Rachel didn't respond. She couldn't. The emotion in her chest was too much. She wanted to lean forward. She wanted to touch her. But she didn't. She stepped back. I'm going home, she said quietly. I just needed to say it. I needed you to know. Lewis nodded once. Thank you for telling me. Rachel hesitated at the door. Then, without turning around, she added, You were right. I don't regret it either. And then she was gone. The elevator ride felt like it took years. Her heart was still racing when she stepped into the cold night, but for the first time in days, it wasn't from fear. It was from the wild, impossible hope that maybe, just maybe, this didn't have to be a disaster. They weren't supposed to be on the same flight. Rachel was originally scheduled to fly out the next morning with 2 other junior analysts. But a last-minute reschedule for optimization purposes landed her on the 7:45 p.m. departure with none other than Louis Blackstone. She tried not to think about what that meant, or if Louis had anything to do with it. But when she boarded and found herself assigned to seat 3A, business class, directly beside 3B, she didn't have to wonder long. Louis was already seated, tablet in hand, blazer perfectly pressed, a small smirk tugging at the corner of her mouth. "Fancy seeing you here," she said, not looking up. Rachel slid into her seat with stiff shoulders.
They upgraded me.
"I didn't ask for it." "Of course not. Did you, Rachel?" Louis looked at her then, and something in her gaze shut down the question before it finished forming. "Let's just say it's convenient." The flight was short, barely 2 hours, but it felt longer. The space between their seats felt like it shrank with every mile. They didn't talk much. A few murmured comments about the client they were meeting. Some neutral small talk. But underneath it all was that constant undercurrent, silent but deafening. Rachel stole glances. Louis did too. Neither acknowledged it. When they landed, it was snowing lightly. The hotel was sleek and modern, all glass and marble, and the Blackstone team took over the top 2 floors. Rachel expected to be separated, like always, 1 room per employee, no exceptions. But when she got to the front desk, the concierge handed her 1 key card and smiled. "You're with Ms. Blackstone. Penthouse suite." Rachel blinked. "I think there's been a mistake." "No mistake," came the voice from behind her. Louis, rolling her suitcase up beside her, expression unreadable. "We're reviewing strategy together tonight. I requested you be moved." Rachel took the card like it was a weapon. The elevator ride was silent. The suite was massive. Too massive. 2 bedrooms, open-plan living room, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city skyline, and a fireplace flickering quietly in the corner. Rachel stood near the door, uncertain. "Louis, this is unprofessional." Louis dropped her coat on the back of a chair. "We'll work from opposite sides of the room, if it helps." "That's not what I was going to say." "Then what were you going to say?" Rachel didn't answer. Louis poured herself a drink from the minibar, then turned, glass in hand. "We need to prep for tomorrow. I don't plan on losing this account." Rachel nodded, pushing everything else down. "Business first." She took out her laptop. They worked. For almost 2 hours. They were exactly what they were supposed to be, analyst and CEO, problem solvers, strategists. Rachel took notes, Louis made calls, they rearranged proposal slides, adjusted numbers, tested projections. The entire time, Rachel tried to ignore how close they were. How familiar Louis's voice had become. How her sleeves were rolled up just enough to show the curve of her forearm. How her scent lingered every time she walked past. At some point, Rachel's back started to ache. She stretched, groaning quietly, and Louis glanced over. "You should stop. You've done enough. We're almost done. I'm serious." Louis stood and walked over, gently taking the laptop from Rachel's hands. "You're exhausted. So are you." "Yes, but I hide it better." Rachel laughed softly. Louis smiled. "Let's take a break," she said, moving to the sofa. "Come sit." Rachel hesitated. Then she joined her. They sat side by side, but not touching. The city lights reflected in the window, coloring everything in shades of silver and blue. Louis sipped her drink. Rachel's hands twisted in her lap. "Why did you do it?" she asked quietly. "Do what?" "Put us in the same suite." Louis looked ahead. "Because I knew if we were in separate rooms, we'd both spend the night wishing we weren't." The honesty landed like a punch. Rachel turned to her. "You said we'd go slow. Be careful." "I did." "This isn't careful." "No," Louis admitted. "It's not." Rachel looked at her for a long time. "Then why aren't you making a move?" Louis met her gaze. Because I'm waiting to see if you will. The air between them thickened. Rachel's breath caught. Her chest rose and fell too quickly. I don't know what I'm doing, she whispered.
Neither do I, Louis said.
But I know I don't want to pretend anymore. Rachel moved first.
It was instinct.
Hunger.
Trust.
A quiet surrender. She leaned in, just enough for their shoulders to brush. Louis didn't pull away. Her hand found Rachel's slowly, fingers threading together. It wasn't a kiss. It wasn't sex. It was something else. Something quieter. More dangerous. Intimacy without pretense. Rachel let her head fall gently against Louis's shoulder. Louis exhaled. Her arm wrapped around her without hesitation, pulling her in. They sat there in silence, wrapped in each other, in a space that felt suspended in time. Rachel's eyes fluttered shut. The weight of the week, the months of tension, all dissolving into the warmth of Louis's touch. Stay, Louis murmured. Rachel didn't answer. She didn't need to. When she woke hours later, the city still glowing beyond the windows, she was in Louis's bed again. Fully clothed.
Safe.
Wrapped in arms that had once seemed so unreachable. This time, she didn't panic. This time, she let herself breathe. Monday hit harder than it should have. Maybe it was the snowstorm that delayed their return flight. Maybe it was the long silence on the ride back from the airport. Louis staring out the window, Rachel watching her reflection in the glass. Or maybe it was the weight of what had passed between them. Not sex. Not declarations. Just closeness. Just a night together, a quiet trust that felt more dangerous than anything physical. Rachel had woken in Louis's bed, fully clothed, warm, held. And Louis hadn't tried to pretend it meant nothing. That was what terrified her most. Monday morning, Rachel stepped out of the elevator with her coat still half on, shoulders hunched against the cold, and instantly felt the shift. People looked up, looked at her. Too long, too curious. She told herself she was imagining it. Paranoia.
Guilt.
But as she passed two coworkers near the break room, she caught a whisper. Kind of weird. She was on the CEO's flight, right? You think something's going on? Come on. You saw them at the holiday party. I heard they shared a suite. Rachel's blood ran cold. She didn't stop walking. She didn't let them see her face. But her stomach twisted violently as she reached her desk. Shared a suite. That wasn't on the public itinerary. No one was supposed to know. She barely sat down before a familiar voice interrupted her thoughts.
Morning.
Rachel looked up. Sarah Kim, marketing director. Sharp, cheerful, always 2 steps ahead of the office gossip. Hey, Rachel said, trying to sound casual. How was the trip? Rachel's throat dried. Productive. I bet, Sarah said, smiling. Too brightly. You and Louis make a good team. Rachel froze. Sorry? I mean, you must, right? She doesn't usually request junior staff for travel. You must have impressed her. Rachel forced a tight smile. I just did my job. Of course, Sarah said. Anyway, if you ever want to grab lunch, let me know. I'd love to pick your brain about the Dubai proposal. And then she was gone. Rachel stared at her screen, heart pounding. It was starting. The whispers.
The shift.
The suspicion. She felt like her skin didn't fit right. Her phone buzzed. A message from Louis, my office. 10:15. Rachel stared at it for a full minute before standing. The walk to the 31st floor felt like walking toward a cliff. She knocked once. Come in. Louis's voice was brisk, unreadable. Rachel entered and closed the door behind her. Louis stood near the window, arms crossed. No smile. No warmth. All business. We have a problem, she said. Rachel nodded. I know. People are talking.
How?
Doesn't matter. They are. Rachel swallowed. Do they know? Louis turned, her gaze sharp. They suspect. And suspicion is all it takes. Rachel exhaled shakily. I didn't say anything. Neither did I. Silence stretched between them. Then Louis said, more quietly, we need to be careful. More than before? Much more. So, What does that mean? It means, Lewis said, stepping closer but not touching her. We don't see each other outside of work for a while. The words hit like ice. Rachel blinked. You're cutting me off? I'm protecting you. By pretending again? By surviving this. Both of us. Rachel looked away. Her throat burned. What if it's too late? Lewis's jaw clenched. Then we don't give them more reasons. So that's it? We just go back to acting like strangers. We never were strangers, Rachel.
Her voice was soft again.
Too soft. But we have to be now. Rachel stepped back. Nodded. Understood. She turned and left the office without another word. The rest of the day passed in a blur. Meetings. Emails. Conversations that felt too loud. Every look felt suspicious. Every laugh behind a closed door felt directed at her. By lunchtime, she'd stopped making eye contact with anyone. She wanted to disappear. That night, Rachel sat in her apartment in complete silence, phone in hand. No messages. No calls. She didn't even know what she would say if she reached out. But the absence of Lewis hurt more than she was ready to admit. She told herself it was smart,
necessary, temporary.
But none of that made it easier. The next day was worse. In the cafeteria, she caught Paul Brennan looking at her, then quickly whispering to someone else. In the elevator, a junior assistant glanced at her badge, then at her face, then quickly looked away. The walls were closing in. And Lewis? Lewis was flawless. Professional. Distant. Impeccably composed. Rachel hated how good she was at it. She hated how easy it seemed for her to pretend. That afternoon, Lewis passed her in the hallway. Their eyes met for a single second. And in that second, Rachel saw everything. Guilt, desire, frustration, regret. And still nothing was said. That night, Rachel cried. Quietly. Alone. Not because she was heartbroken.
Not yet.
But because she finally realized how fragile everything she had built was. Her career. Her self-control. Her heart. All it took was one woman to shake it all.
It was supposed to be a routine presentation.
Numbers. Forecasts. A proposal for a logistics optimization strategy for one of their longest-standing clients. Rachel had built the entire deck herself. She knew every slide by heart, every data point memorized down to the decimal. Under normal circumstances, she could have delivered it in her sleep. But nothing about her life felt normal anymore. Not with Lewis avoiding her eyes in every meeting. Not with the cold, polite emails that replaced the heat of their late-night conversations. Not with the quiet ache that lived in Rachel's chest every time she saw Lewis walk by and didn't say a word. So when the time came for her to present in front of 3 board members, 2 senior partners, and, of course, Lewis herself, Rachel was already unraveling before she stepped up to the screen. Her voice started steady. Her posture was perfect, but her heart wouldn't behave. It pounded like it was trying to escape her ribcage, especially when she felt Lewis's gaze on her from across the table. Rachel tried not to look, but it was like standing near fire. You could not feel it. As you can see in the Q2 comparative, she began, laser pointer shaking ever so slightly in her hand. We expect a 7.4% increase in operational efficiency based on, she paused. Her throat tightened. Her eyes flicked to the next line of data, and then, just for a second, to Lewis. Lewis looked up. Their eyes met.
It was a mistake.
A second too long. A glance too full. And in that second, Rachel lost her words. She blinked. Her voice stalled. The room went quiet. Sorry, she said quickly, heat rushing to her face. Just a moment. She flipped to the next slide too early, then backtracked. Fumbled. One of the board members coughed awkwardly. Lewis shifted in her seat, jaw tight. Rachel swallowed and pushed through the rest of the presentation, her voice recovering, but her pride already shattered. When she finished, she stepped away from the screen with a smile that felt like glass, sharp and fragile and fake. Thank you, Rachel, said one of the partners. Polite applause.
Nods.
A few questions. And then it was over. People filed out slowly. Lewis stayed seated. Rachel gathered her notes with trembling fingers, avoiding eye contact. She could feel the judgment in the room, imagined it even if it wasn't real. She was halfway to the door when she heard Lewis's voice. Mitchell. A word. Rachel froze. The rest of the team continued out, not curious enough to linger. When the door finally closed and they were alone, Rachel didn't turn around. I know, she said softly. I messed up. You froze. It won't happen again. You're distracted. Rachel exhaled, eyes burning. I'm doing my best. I know. Lewis's voice wasn't cold this time, just tired. But your best used to be better than this. That one cut deeper than it should have. Rachel turned. I didn't ask for any of this. You pulled me in. You challenged me. You made it impossible to ignore you. Lewis stood.
Slowly.
And now I'm trying to forget you and failing. The words hung between them like smoke. Lewis didn't move. I never asked you to forget me. No, Rachel said, voice cracking. You asked me to stay quiet.
To hide.
To pretend. And I did. But I'm not built for this, Lewis. I can't be two different people. I can't be excellent and invisible at the same time. Lewis crossed the room with slow, measured steps until they were standing too close. Her voice dropped. You're not invisible. Not to me. You never were. Rachel's lip trembled. Then why do you keep acting like you don't see me? Lewis's hand twitched, as if she wanted to reach out but stopped herself. Because if I don't, maybe I can keep you safe. From what? From me, she whispered. That did it. Rachel took a shaky step back. I don't need protection. I need honesty. And if you can't give me that, then maybe we should both stop pretending this was ever more than a mistake. Lewis flinched like she'd been slapped. Rachel turned and left without another word. She made it to the bathroom before the tears came. Not loud. Not dramatic. Just quiet, shuddering breaths over the sink. She stared at her reflection, her smeared mascara, the crack in her voice, the woman trying so hard to keep it together. She was tired. Of hiding. Of hoping. Of hurting. That night, she stayed late in the office, avoiding her apartment, her thoughts, everything. She worked until her eyes blurred. Around 10, she left. The building was dark except for a few scattered lights. As she stepped into the elevator, her phone buzzed. A message. From an unknown number. Check your inbox.
I sent something you need to see.
S.K. Sarah Kim. Rachel's stomach twisted. She opened her email. A forwarded message. Subject line. Confidential. Inappropriate conduct? Attached was a blurry photo of Rachel and Lewis in the hotel lobby. Lewis's hand on her back. Nothing scandalous. Nothing explicit. But enough. Enough to look like something. Enough to become something. Rachel's fingers went cold. This wasn't just suspicion anymore. It was evidence. Or at least the beginning of it. And she had no idea how far it would go. Rachel didn't sleep that night. She lay in bed with her laptop open beside her, staring at the photo over and over again. It wasn't scandalous. It wasn't proof of anything concrete.
But it didn't need to be.
It just had to exist. The timing, the posture, the angle, it all hinted at something intimate. Lewis's hand on her back. The way Rachel's head tilted toward her. The smile that had been half hidden but undeniably there. She could already hear the whispers. She could see the way people would twist it. Her success reduced to proximity. Her competence rewritten as seduction. It made her sick. By morning, she couldn't take it anymore. She arrived at the office early, half hoping Lewis wouldn't be there yet. But of course she was. Always ahead. Always prepared. Rachel knocked only once before entering, the photo already printed and trembling in her hand. Lewis looked up from her desk and froze the second she saw Rachel's face.
Close the door, she said.
Rachel did. We have a problem, Rachel said, voice brittle. I saw. You already know? Sarah forwarded it to me last night. Rachel blinked. You didn't say anything. Because I was waiting to see what you'd do. What I'd do. Rachel snapped. This isn't just my problem. Lewis stood slowly, her eyes dark but steady. I know, which is why I've already started fixing it. Rachel narrowed her eyes. What does that mean? It means I have a plan. Of course you do. Don't do that. Do what? Treat me like the villain in this, Lewis said, her voice low, almost hurt. I didn't take that photo. I didn't send it.
I didn't create this mess.
But I will clean it up. Rachel sat down hard, suddenly exhausted. I don't know how to survive this. You don't have to. I will. And how exactly do you plan on doing that? Lewis hesitated. We go public. Rachel stared at her like she'd been slapped. What? Not with a press release. Not with a statement. But we stop hiding. We stop pretending. If someone asks, we don't deny. Are you insane? I'm done being afraid. Lewis, this could ruin you. And it would definitely ruin me. Not if I get ahead of it. You're talking about throwing yourself into the fire. I'm talking about stepping into the fire with you. Rachel stood.
Pacing.
This is career suicide. There are policies. I wrote the policies. Your board will revolt. Let them. Rachel looked at her, stunned. You're willing to risk everything? Lewis crossed the room in 3 slow steps. Not everything. Just the mask. Just the lie. Rachel's throat tightened.
Why?
Because I've already tried life without you in it. And it doesn't work. The words cut through her like glass. You don't mean that. I do. Lewis's voice was raw now.
Honest.
Rachel, I've spent my entire life building something no one could touch. I became what people expected. Cold. Unshakable. But you, she paused, reaching gently for Rachel's hand. You're the only thing that's ever made me want to be more than that. Rachel looked down at their hands. Her fingers curled around Lewis's without thinking. And what if we fall? Then we fall together. Rachel wanted to believe her.
God, she wanted to.
But the fear was a wall inside her chest. What do we do now? We control the narrative, Lewis said, slipping her hand away gently. I'll speak to legal, to HR. I'll make it clear that this wasn't predatory, that no policies were broken, that there was no favoritism. But there was favoritism. There was connection, Lewis corrected. And if they want to punish me for that, let them try. Rachel took a shaky breath. And me. You'll keep your head high. You'll stay excellent. No more hiding. Rachel laughed bitterly. That's easy for you to say. You're at the top. Which is exactly why I'll take the hit first. The words hung there, waited. Rachel looked at her for a long, long time. If we do this, she said slowly, we do it on my terms too. Agreed. No sudden announcements. No power plays. Just honesty. Lewis nodded. Whatever you need. Rachel exhaled. It felt like the first real breath she'd taken in days. Okay. Okay, she repeated. Let's do it. Lewis smiled then. A real smile. Small, stunned, and impossibly tender. Rachel felt her chest warm despite herself. We're really doing this, Lewis whispered. Rachel nodded. God help us. Lewis laughed. I don't think he will. Then we better help each other. We already are. For the rest of the day, they were careful, distant in meetings, professional in hallways. But there was a shift now, a shared secret that no longer felt like a noose around their necks, but a flame they were finally willing to walk toward. At lunch, Rachel sat alone in the mezzanine corner again. Lewis didn't join her, but an intern passed by and smiled at her like she was someone worth noticing. And for the first time in weeks, Rachel smiled back. Rachel had never sat in a conference room that cold before. It wasn't the temperature. It was the tone. HR, legal, corporate affairs. They were all there, and for once, Lewis wasn't leading the room. She was defending her place in it. Rachel sat 3 chairs away from her, per protocol. Lewis hadn't looked at her once. The room wasn't accusatory, not yet, but it was filled with something worse. Polite concern. Legal phrased it as preemptive investigation into perception risks. HR called it an internal climate check following unsubstantiated rumors. No one said the word relationship. But they didn't need to. Ms. Blackstone, one of the partners began, adjusting his glasses as if preparing to dissect a scandal. Given your position, we'd like to understand the nature of your interactions with Ms. Mitchell during the recent business trip. Lewis didn't blink. She is a junior analyst assigned to my team on the Dubai account. Her performance has been exemplary. She accompanied me on a trip relevant to her direct project. And the shared suite? We worked late. She stayed in the guest room of the penthouse. The decision was mine, and I take full responsibility for the optics. The words were perfect, measured, unapologetic. But Rachel saw it. The tightness in Lewis's jaw, the subtle way her fingers clenched under the table. They were holding her breath together. Is there any personal involvement that might compromise objectivity in future decisions? The legal advisor asked. Rachel's stomach turned. Lewis paused, then said, there is mutual respect, and the recognition that personal feelings, if they exist, are to be kept separate from professional decisions. My judgment has not been, and will not be, compromised.
It was a masterclass in control.
And yet, Rachel felt herself sinking. Because if they exist was the kind of sentence that erased everything they'd built in private. The meeting ended with vague assurances, follow-ups, and reminders of policy. Rachel was told not to worry, that no disciplinary action was being pursued. But no one said the storm was over. And the storm had just begun. Because when Rachel returned to her desk, there was an envelope waiting for her. No label, just her name. Inside, a simple note. You're not the first girl she's done this with. Rachel stared at the paper until the words blurred. The panic didn't hit immediately. It was slower. A rising sickness that climbed her spine.
Who had sent it?
And was it true? She didn't want to believe it. Lewis didn't seem like someone who played games. But then again, how well did she really know her? She almost marched to the 31st floor, almost slammed the paper on Lewis's desk and demanded the truth. But she didn't. Because as she stepped off the elevator, she saw someone else in Lewis's office. A tall, silver-haired man. Expensive suit. Posture of a king. He wasn't smiling. And Lewis looked nothing like the CEO Rachel knew. She looked young.
Smaller.
Defensive. The door was half closed, but Rachel caught just enough. Your personal life is no longer your own, the man said. It never was. You knew that when you took the name. I am the name, Lewis replied, low and sharp. Then act like it. The door shut the rest of the way. Rachel stepped back, heart pounding. That was her father. The infamous Richard Blackstone. Founder. Chairman emeritus. And clearly furious. Rachel didn't know what shocked her more, that he'd shown up unannounced, or that Lewis had allowed herself to look shaken in front of him. She returned to her desk, head spinning. Later that day, Lewis messaged her. My place. 9 p.m. No pressure. But I need to talk. Rachel almost didn't go. Almost let fear win. But at 8:59, she was in the elevator of that same glass building, holding her breath. Lewis opened the door before she even knocked. She looked tired. Her blazer gone, sleeves rolled up. A glass of wine untouched on the table. Come in, she said softly. Rachel stepped inside. Is everything okay? Define okay, Lewis said with a bitter smile. I had a meeting with legal. Then HR. Then my father. I saw. Lewis raised an eyebrow. You eavesdropped. The door was half open. I couldn't help it. Lewis exhaled, walked toward the window. The skyline glittered behind her like a lie. He wants me to make a statement. A denial. Public, if necessary. Rachel's heart sank. Will you? Lewis turned. No, even after the note? Lewis froze. What note? Rachel pulled the paper from her bag and handed it over. Lewis read it, her jaw tightening with each word. This isn't true, she said, voice flat. You've never, she said firmly. You're the only one. Rachel wanted to believe her. And did. Almost too quickly. Then someone's trying to scare me. They're trying to divide us. Rachel sat down slowly. Do we even know what us means? Lewis walked over, knelt in front of her. It means I'm not going to pretend you don't matter to me. It means I'm done lying to protect people who wouldn't protect me. Her hand found Rachel's. It means I'm scared too, but not scared enough to lose you. Rachel looked at her, eyes glassy. Then let's fight. Louis smiled. Together? Always. And that word, always, was the beginning of something neither of them dared name yet. But it felt real. More real than anything the Blackstone name had ever stood for. The boardroom smelled like tension. Polished oak, glass water pitchers, and tension. It sat in the air like smoke, impossible to ignore, impossible to breathe through. Louis entered first.
Silent. Composed.
Wearing black. The kind of black that said, "Don't underestimate me." The kind of black that said, "I've come to war." Rachel sat 3 floors below, in a meeting room with her laptop open but untouched. She wasn't allowed in. It was a closed-door session. Only the board, the general counsel, and Louis. She told Louis not to go alone. Louis said it had to be this way. Rachel's leg bounced under the table. She checked her phone 3 times. Nothing. No messages. No updates. Only silence. Upstairs, Louis stood before 11 board members, most of whom had known her since she was 24. Some since she was born. Richard Blackstone sat at the head of the table, flanked by Alden Pierce, the oldest, most conservative voice in the room. "We're not here to shame you, Louis," Alden began, tapping his gold pen on a notepad. "We're here to protect the company." "From what?" she asked. "From perception. Perception isn't policy. Perception is power. You know that better than anyone." Louis didn't sit. She never sat unless she was in control. Let's be clear. No policies were violated. No favoritism occurred. Rachel Mitchell's track record speaks for itself. Her promotion was earned. "And the hotel suite?" someone else asked. "I made that call." "The late-night office visits?" "Also me." "And the rumor of a personal relationship?" "True," Louis said. Silence. Richard shifted slightly. "Louis, don't correct me," she said. "I won't lie to this room. Then you understand the risk you've created." Alden leaned forward. "Your leadership is not just operational. It's symbolic. You represent legacy, discipline. If this becomes public, we lose investors. We lose trust. What are you suggesting?" "A temporary leave. 30 days. You step back. Let the firm handle internal restructuring quietly. Prove that no favoritism influenced your decisions. We frame it as a leadership sabbatical. After that, you return, assuming the press doesn't explode." Louis stared at him. "And Rachel?" "She stays. As long as you leave. And if I don't, then she's dismissed." Louis didn't react. Not outwardly. Not yet. But her fingers curled slowly into fists. "You'd punish her for something I did. We'd protect the company from both of you," Alden said. "This is not personal. This is legacy." Richard finally spoke. "You always wanted to prove you were more than my daughter. This is your chance to show it. Do the right thing." Louis's voice, when it came, was calm. I see. So I'm only fit to lead when I'm cold. Untouchable. Alone." "No one said that. You didn't have to." The room was quiet. Louis turned to the window. Manhattan stared back at her, indifferent. She had worked her entire adult life to sit at this table, to earn their respect, to reshape a legacy she hadn't asked to inherit. And now they were asking her to prove she still deserved it by abandoning the one person who made her feel alive again. "Give me an hour," she said, "to consider your terms." 30 minutes, Alden replied. Louis left the room without another word. She walked down the stairwell, not the elevator. She needed to move.
Breathe.
Feel her pulse to remember she was still human. When she entered the smaller conference room, Rachel stood immediately. "What happened?" "They gave me an ultimatum," Louis said. "I step down for a month, or they fire you." Rachel's face fell. "What?" "They think it'll satisfy the rumor mill. That if I disappear for a few weeks, the fire dies down. And if you say no, they'll terminate your contract. Quietly. End of quarter." Rachel stared at her, stunned. "You can't do this." You can't give up everything for me. I'm not giving up. I'm making space. You've fought your whole life to get here. And I've fought alone. Lewis stepped closer. But this time, I'm not willing to lose what I found with you just to satisfy a boardroom full of men who think strength means silence. Rachel shook her head. You shouldn't have to choose. I already have. No, Rachel's voice trembled. If you do this, I'll walk away. I'll resign myself. Don't be ridiculous. I'm serious. Rachel's eyes burned. I won't let them use me as leverage. I won't be the reason you lose this. You're not the reason. You're the line. And I'm choosing to cross it. Rachel reached for her hand, desperate.
Please.
Think. I already did. Every night, I woke up missing you. Every morning I walked past you pretending not to want to touch you. I thought. And now I know. Rachel leaned her forehead against Lewis's. Then let me fight too. Let me stand with you. Not in hiding. Not as your secret. But as your equal. Lewis smiled faintly, eyes wet. Then come with me. Where? Back into that room. Together. Rachel froze. What? They want a symbol. Let's give them one. Let's show them we're not ashamed. Let's make them uncomfortable, because we're not the problem. Rachel hesitated. If this goes wrong, we fall together. Rachel exhaled. Always. Lewis laced their fingers together. Then let's go. And just like that, they walked, side by side, into the room that had judged them before they even spoke. This time, they would not be quiet. This time, they would not apologize. When Lewis Blackstone re-entered the boardroom, it was not alone. The door opened with quiet finality, and every head lifted, startled, then silent. Rachel Mitchell followed behind her, shoulders squared, gaze steady, heels clicking softly on the polished floor like punctuation marks no one expected. She looked small among the towering figures seated at the table, but she didn't shrink. Not anymore. She stood beside Lewis, as if she belonged there. As if she had always belonged there. This is highly irregular, Alden Pierce said, voice tight, pen tapping more aggressively now. She's not on the agenda. She's relevant to it, Lewis replied calmly. And you've all discussed her in this room. I think she has a right to hear it for herself. Richard Blackstone sat frozen, jaw clenched, watching. Rachel didn't look at him. She looked straight ahead. Lewis turned to the group. I've made my decision. I will not step down. Not for 30 days. Not for 30 minutes. Murmurs. Alden leaned forward. Then you understand the consequences. I do, Lewis said. And I reject your premise that love is a threat to leadership. That word.
Love.
Rachel flinched, breath catching, even as warmth spread through her chest like wildfire. She hadn't expected Lewis to say it. Not here. Not like that. But she didn't move. Didn't run. Lewis continued. This company belongs to the future, not the past. And the future does not punish people for connection, for vulnerability, for honesty. Alden was fuming. And how exactly do you propose we spin this?
You don't, Lewis said.
Because I already have. She reached into her folder and pulled out a printed statement. Effective this morning, the internal PR team was briefed. We've issued a controlled release. I have disclosed that a personal relationship is developing with an employee. I've confirmed that all conduct remains within policy and that transparency will be maintained moving forward. I have volunteered to recuse myself from any direct oversight of Ms. Mitchell's performance. Her role will now report to the CFO for impartiality. The room erupted in overlapping protests. You went public? Without our approval. You've exposed the firm. I protected the firm. Lewis snapped, voice rising just enough to command silence. If this story was going to leak, it would do so on someone else's terms. I chose ours. She placed the printed press release in front of Alden. And before you ask, I ran it by legal. It's clean. He scanned it quickly, nostrils flaring. You always were 10 steps ahead, he muttered. It's why I sit at this table, Lewis replied. Then, softer, and why I won't be stepping away from it. Richard cleared his throat. You understand, Louis, that this puts a spotlight on the company. On me. On your mother. I'm aware. And you're willing to carry that? I've been carrying it my whole life.
Her voice was calm now.
Controlled. The difference is now I choose how. Richard looked at her, and for the first time, his expression cracked, not into approval, but into something closer to resignation. Or pride, buried beneath decades of silence. He gave a single nod, not of agreement, but of understanding. Then so be it, Alden said reluctantly. But don't expect the fallout to be quiet. It wasn't. Within the hour, the statement was live. News alerts pinged across phones in the building. Breaking, CEO Louis Blackstone confirms relationship with junior analyst Rachel Mitchell, cites transparency and compliance. By the end of the day, Rachel's name was trending on Twitter. Industry blogs speculated. Anonymous comments filled the forums. Some applauded the move, calling it bold, even revolutionary. Others were cruel, dismissive.
Ugly.
Rachel sat in her apartment that night, scrolling through it all in a daze. Her inbox was a storm. Her phone had vibrated so many times it finally died. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She just sat there, overwhelmed, terrified, and alive. At exactly 10:17 p.m., her buzzer rang. She already knew who it was. She opened the door, and there stood Louis. Less composed than usual. Hair slightly mussed. Jacket unbuttoned. But her eyes were clear.
I had to see you, she said.
I thought you might want to punch me, Rachel replied, stepping aside. I considered it, Louis said, entering. But then I remembered you said you'd fall with me. Rachel closed the door. So, this is what falling feels like. Louis turned.
No.
This is what flying feels like, right before the ground. Rachel exhaled. The press will do what it always does.
Spin.
Speculate. Forget in a week. And until then? Louis reached out, cupping Rachel's face. We hold. Hold what? Each other. Rachel closed her eyes. Let herself lean in. Let herself breathe. For the first time in weeks, she let the chaos exist outside them. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring. But tonight, she wasn't hiding. Not from the world. Not from Louis. Not from herself. The city didn't stop. It never did. Headlines faded, yes, and the push alerts slowed, but the noise never really went away. Rachel was learning that silence could be loud in its own way, the kind that lived in glances on the subway, in paused conversations when she walked into a room, in friends who took too long to respond to messages that used to be instant. Her world hadn't collapsed, but the shape of it had changed. And in the middle of it all was Louis, calm, steady, and somehow still standing. But even she was starting to fray at the edges. Rachel noticed it in the way Louis's replies had shortened, in the tension that never fully left her shoulders, in the exhaustion behind her eyes, even when her mouth smiled. One night, after yet another article resurfaced online, this one quoting a former intern who claimed to have always suspected something between them, Rachel closed her laptop, turned to Louis on the couch, and said, "Let's leave." Louis blinked. "You mean I'll leave the company?" "No," Rachel said, laughing softly. "God, no. I mean, just go. Disappear for a few days. Clear our heads. Be somewhere where no one knows our names." Louis tilted her head, amused. "You want me to run away?" "No," Rachel said. "I want us to breathe." Louis didn't answer right away. But that night, she sent Rachel a text at 2:13 a.m. Pack a weekend bag. Don't ask questions. We leave at 10. Rachel didn't ask. She packed. And at exactly 10 o'clock the next morning, she found herself in the passenger seat of Louis's obsidian black SUV, watching the skyline of Manhattan disappear in the rearview mirror. "Where are we going?" she asked after 20 minutes of silence and open highway. Louis glanced over. "Upstate. A cabin. Belongs to a friend who owes me a favor." "You have cabin friends?" "I have friends who make good investments and bad decisions. This one is both." The drive was long, quiet, oddly comforting. Snow dusted the trees along the road like powdered sugar, and by the time they arrived, the sun was starting to set behind a frozen lake. The cabin was all dark wood and clean lines, minimalist but warm. Rachel stepped inside and felt her lungs expand for the first time in days. "There's no signal here," Lewis said, tossing her keys into a bowl near the door. "No Wi-Fi. No press. No board meetings. No headlines," Rachel asked. "Just pine trees. Sounds illegal." "Feels like it," Lewis said with a grin. That night, they made dinner together, badly. Lewis, despite her power and polish, could barely boil pasta. Rachel tried to hide her laughter as Lewis read the instructions on a jar of sauce like it was a contract negotiation. "This is beneath me," Lewis muttered. "Yes," Rachel agreed, "but it's deeply entertaining." They ate on the couch, wrapped in blankets, the fireplace casting golden light across Lewis's features. It was the first time Rachel had seen her without armor in weeks. No heels, no suits, just a hoodie, soft socks, and an expression that looked like peace. "You look," Rachel hesitated. "What?" "Real." Lewis turned to her. "I'm always real." "No, you're always composed. Controlled. I don't think I've ever seen you relax. I don't know how to be." "You're doing it right now." Lewis looked down at their hands, tangled together beneath the blanket. "You make it easy." Rachel smiled. "That's the nicest thing anyone said to me after a national PR nightmare." Lewis leaned in, forehead brushing hers. "I'm sorry you're going through this." "We're going through it." "Still," Lewis murmured, "if I could take the hits for you, I would." Rachel cupped her cheek. "I'd never let you." Silence stretched between them, soft and full. "Do you regret it?" Rachel asked. Lewis didn't answer right away. "Not for a second," she said. "Even with everything?" "Especially because of everything." "Why?" Lewis pulled her in slowly, their foreheads pressed, lips nearly touching but not quite. "Because I never knew how lonely I was until I met you. And I never want to feel that alone again." Rachel kissed her. Slow. Sure. Not rushed. Not hungry. Just there. A kiss full of knowing. Full of gratitude. Full of everything they hadn't said in the boardroom or on the front page. That night, they slept in the same bed, not like the night after the holiday party, not like the hotel suite. This time, there was no tequila. No secrecy. Just warmth. Legs tangled. Arms around each other. Rachel woke up once in the middle of the night and found Lewis watching her. "You're staring," she whispered. "I'm memorizing. Dangerous habit. Only if I forget." Rachel smiled, pulled her closer, and they slept. The next morning, they didn't rush to leave. They drank coffee on the porch, wrapped in one oversized blanket, watching the frozen lake catch sunlight like glass. The world could wait. For now, there was peace. The city was louder when they returned. Not in sound, but in scrutiny. The kind that followed them into elevators and through lobbies, quiet and pointed. Rachel could feel it again, that invisible net tightening around her chest, the weight of being seen too much, too often. But something had changed. Maybe it was the way Lewis held her hand a beat longer before letting go in the office. Maybe it was the quiet confidence in Lewis's gaze when she answered a question in a meeting, not just as a CEO, but as a woman unafraid to be seen beside the woman she loved. Love. They hadn't said it out loud. Not in so many words. But it lived in the way Lewis poured her coffee without asking. In the way Rachel straightened Lewis's collar before a presentation. In the silences that had stopped being awkward and started being full. Still, reality didn't wait. 2 days after their return, Lewis's assistant slipped a silver invitation onto her desk. The annual Blackstone Gala, an event that gathered investors, media, clients, and every important name the company had ever worked with. Rachel barely looked at it until her name appeared on the envelope too. Inside, a smaller card. Personalized. Ms. Rachel Mitchell is cordially invited to attend the Blackstone Gala as a guest of the CEO. Guest. Not employee. Not consultant. Guest. Rachel stared at it like it might catch fire. "You don't have to go," Lewis said later, when they sat at her office, Door closed, blinds down. I know it's a lot. You want me there? I want you with me. Lewis met her eyes. I want to stop pretending that the only part of my life I'm allowed to celebrate is the part people already approve of. They're going to stare. Let them. They'll talk. They already are. Rachel held the card tighter. This is different. It's honest. Rachel exhaled. Then let's be honest. Lewis smiled. Wear red. The night of the gala arrived like a storm, slow, building, heavy in the air. Rachel stood in front of her mirror longer than she ever had before. The dress was deep crimson, sleek, with a subtle slit and low back. Bold. Defiant. Nothing about it whispered safe. She wasn't hiding anymore. When she stepped out of the car, she did it alone. At first, flashes exploded. She ignored them. Head high. Inside, the venue shimmered. Chandeliers, marble floors, champagne flutes catching light. Then she saw her. Lewis, across the room. Black tuxedo tailored to perfection. Hair slicked back. Jaw set. And when their eyes met, Rachel saw it. The breath Lewis took. Slow. Deliberate. Like she was seeing her for the first time all over again. Lewis crossed the floor like the room didn't exist. Stopped in front of her. Offered her hand. You came. You asked. You wore red. You said we're something honest. Lewis smiled. You're breathtaking. Rachel's heart stuttered. So are you. They turned, together, and faced the crowd. Whispers swelled. Phones lifted. Some faces smiled, others didn't. But neither of them flinched. Not when Lewis placed a gentle hand on the small of Rachel's back. Not when she guided her to the main table. Not when the press approached and Rachel, for the first time, didn't step aside. Ms. Blackstone, is this your official confirmation? One reporter asked. Lewis didn't hesitate. It's not confirmation, she said. It's introduction. Her hand found Rachel's again. This is Rachel. She's brilliant. She's brave, and she's with me. The air in the room shifted. Cameras clicked like fireworks. Rachel's fingers tightened around Lewis's. Later, as the evening softened and music played, Rachel let Lewis lead her onto the dance floor. Neither of them danced well, not really. But they swayed. Close. Breathing the same air. Moving to music no one else seemed to hear. Do you regret this? Rachel whispered. No, Lewis murmured. Do you? Rachel shook her head. I'm scared. So am I. But I'm proud too. Lewis smiled. Then we're doing it right. The song faded. The night blurred. But the moment stayed crystallized. Not perfect. Not easy. But real. And they were no longer hiding. The gala was over, but the storm wasn't. On Monday morning, Rachel walked into the office and the silence was deafening. Not hostile. Not exactly. Just loaded. Her face had been on 3 business blogs over the weekend. One headline read, CEO Power Move or PR Nightmare. Lewis Blackstone debuts girlfriend at gala. Another, crueler. The analyst who slept her way to the top. Rachel didn't cry. She read every headline. She read the comments too. And then she closed the tab and walked into the office wearing the same red lipstick from the night of the gala. Lewis hadn't told her not to. But the first wave of backlash came quickly. An investor dropped a pending deal. A senior partner sent a private message recommending discretion in future public events. A junior employee made a joke in the break room about Lewis's girlfriend getting special seating, and Rachel heard it. Lewis handled it all with quiet precision.
She didn't yell.
She didn't rage. She documented. She acted. She reorganized 2 teams to remove direct reporting lines. She issued an internal memo redefining boundaries and expectations with clarity and force. She called out the misogyny, the double standards, the whispered criticisms. And then 3 days later, it happened. Rachel was called into a meeting with HR, alone. When she walked out, she looked pale. Not because she was in trouble, but because they'd made her an offer. A rival consulting firm, smaller but rising fast, had reached out through internal channels with a proposal, a full-time strategist position. Better pay. Clean slate. No rumors. No past. Just her name, her work, her merit.
She didn't know what to do.
That night, Rachel found Louis sitting in her apartment, already changed into sweats, a mug of tea in hand, eyes tired. "You heard?" Rachel asked. Louis nodded. "HR told me. I didn't apply. They just offered." "Of course they did," Louis said quietly. "You're exceptional." Rachel sat beside her. "It's a chance to have my name back." "I know. It's also a chance to start over. Without the looks, the whispers, without you." Louis didn't speak. Rachel's voice cracked. "Do you want me to go?" Louis looked at her, then really looked. "I want you to stay. But I won't ask you to." Silence. Rachel placed the offer letter on the table. "It's tempting." Louis nodded. "I'd understand. But," Rachel whispered, voice shaking, "I didn't survive all this to run now." Louis turned slowly. Rachel continued, "I didn't fight for this, for us, just to hide again under another company name. I'm tired of making myself small to make other people comfortable." Louis's breath hitched. "So, unless you want out," Rachel said, "I'm staying." Louis set her mug down, stood, and walked to her. "Are you sure?" she whispered. Rachel looked up at her. "I've never been more sure of anything in my life." Louis kissed her, soft, slow, reverent. A promise. The next morning, Rachel declined the offer. She walked into the office with her head high. Her team applauded quietly when she entered the conference room. Someone had left a sticky note on her laptop. "Thank you for being brave, so we could be too." 2 weeks later, the company hosted a diversity panel. Louis spoke. So did Rachel. Together. 3 months later, Rachel was promoted. Not because of Louis, because of her work, because she earned it. 6 months later, they moved in together. And 1 year after the night of the holiday party, 1 year after the tequila, the elevator, the blackout that changed everything, Rachel found herself in a restaurant in Paris, watching Louis slide a ring across the table with a nervous smile. No press, no headlines, no strategy, just love. And Rachel said yes, because once upon a time, her CEO had challenged her to a drinking contest. And she woke up in her bed. But now, she was waking up in her life. And she didn't want to be anywhere else. Thank you so much for being here and for believing in this channel. If you feel in your heart, you can donate with super thanks so I can focus more and more on this project. Your support helps me keep creating these love stories and bringing them to life for you. See you in the next video.